leveraging her strengths to offer the best opportunities on the global scale. Ladies and gentlemen, please do share your thoughts and suggestions on our social media handles, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and do use our trending hashtag, that's IEC 2022.
Now, India has taken the lead in fronting the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, and with her scale and speed. The unique digital innovations and solutions by the government today have leapfrogged India into becoming a mobile-first economy that has enabled social and financial inclusion on an unimaginable scale and built up India as the third largest startup ecosystem to empower the unempowered.
Now, to understand better the nuances of India's digital revolution, I would like to invite on stage Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and Electronics and IT, Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar, in conversation with Managing Editor ET Now Swadesh, Nikunj Dalmia.
Good evening, everybody. I guess the pandemic has really rebooted one sector, and that sector is indeed IT. It's a very proud moment for us when we say that the Indian IT exports now are nearly $200 billion. And to give you a number here, that is as large as what Saudi Arabia Aramco's oil exports are. So that is the size of Indian IT industry in terms of an export market. But even though the industry is poised to grow at double digit, there are multiple challenges. Some of those challenges can translate into opportunity, and some of those challenges they need to be addressed urgently. So it gives me great pleasure once again to welcome Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar at the Indian Economic Conclave. Mr. Chandrasekhar, fantastic to have you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to India Economic Conclave. My introduction perhaps was the question in itself. It's a very proud moment for all of us when
Thank you.
Right, when we compare India's IT exports. Who would have thought less than 10 years ago, India's IT exports would actually be higher than what Saudi Arabia Aramco's oil exports are?
That is true. And I think in addition to the number itself, Nikunj, there's a very important other metric, which is the growth rate. The technology sector last year alone, which is the IT services business, has grown over 15%. And that kind of a growth has come after really more than a decade. And I have referred to this when I speak to the industry as almost the new Y2K moment for India's tech space. And in addition to this, and I don't know if you've picked up on this, there is a difference in the nature and the quality of the IT and technology ecosystem today that India is currently excelling at. It is a much more diversified space. Just a few years ago, we were a country that depended very significantly on IT services. And today we have IT services, the internet economy, deep tech startups. And so there is a very, very tremendous momentum in the diversification and the expansion and broadening of technology opportunities in India that is underway over the last some years, but accelerated in the last 12 to 24 months.
But sir, some would argue that while we have all the necessary ingredients in the melting pot, the temperature of the melting pot, which is wage inflation, is also rising. And soon that would be a challenge for us. So what became our advantage in terms of an arbitrage and cost arbitrage, that could also be the biggest challenge for us in terms of talent and also wage inflation.
No, I agree. I think talent and expanding the talent pool is one of the biggest challenges facing the entire technology ecosystem today. And it is my personal opinion that the wage inflation is a consequence of, and I don't want to necessarily blame people, but essentially the industry not really having forecast its requirements of talent adequately. Now, you can argue that really it was not easy for somebody to sit in 2019 and anticipate that we are going to grow at 15% in 2021, 2022, and that may be true. But I believe that with our initiatives in skilling and the significant expansion of the talent pool that we in the government are working with the industry at, we will see the talent pool expand, the supply side of the tech ecosystem expand significantly, and that may have, I hope, will have some impact on the blip that we have seen in the last 12 to 18 months on wages and essentially talent demand. It is a good kind of a problem to have, Nikunj. On one hand, it is a bad kind of a problem to have if you have really not forecasted and planned for the demand side of the talent.
That's a glass half full approach, but I guess that is the right approach, at least given what is happening in the Indian IT sector. I'd like to draw your attention to something which we don't refer to and we don't really pat our back for it, which is the India stack. And the readiness of India stack, technology has been a big enabler there, whether it is UPI, Aadhaar, or success of CoWIN. Could you walk us through that, what this changes for us? Every time when we talk to global investors, they are excited, delighted, and I would also say jealous about what's happening to the India stack and the preparedness there.
No, you're absolutely right. I think one of the big changes in the narrative about India has occurred over the last 24 months. While there has always been a lot of respect for India's technology prowess, but over the last 2 years, the way technology has been deployed in the face of this pandemic and the way these public platforms that have been built up over the last few years have really become part of the solution to delivering vaccinations, to managing the healthcare crisis, and including delivering subsidies and delivering in a directed manner food to the poor, has really caught the attention of India, attention of the world. And this is even a bigger issue now for the rest of the world, as countries like the US and even countries like China are grappling and continue to grapple with the pandemic and vaccine delivery. So I think it is clear that the scale that India offers and the rapid digitization of our own societies, rapid digitization of government and rapid digitization of consumers, and the fact that we have 800 million Indians online, that number is poised to reach 1.2, 1.3 billion Indians in the next 3 to 4 years, really makes India, which was a decade ago a consumer of technologies, now moving forward in the India's decade, as the Honorable Prime Minister refers to it, in the next 10 years, as the driver of innovation, platforms at scale. And Aadhaar, which went through many ups and downs, and then our government, really deployed it in a manner very effectively, has demonstrated what at-scale platforms can do, not just in terms of digitizing government and improving governance, but by also of creating this vibrant startup ecosystem around it. And I think that is what India today is demonstrating. This growth of our startup and innovation ecosystem and the pace at which it is growing, the scorching pace of the innovations that are coming out of the startup ecosystem has a lot to do. And I know I'm the government and you expect me to take some credit and you think it will be a fake credit, but I genuinely believe that the efforts that the government has done in digitizing governance has really played an important role in the fintech ecosystem, in the many of the other startup ecosystem innovations that we are seeing today and that the world is watching and is embracing.
So while you represent the government, I'm also a journalist, so I'll have to do my dharma, which is that asking you an odd question. I'm going to quote the Niti Aayog here, which is Niti Aayog has observed that India has a large number of disparity in between internet users. While the penetration may have increased, we are talking about disparity. How can the great Indian digital revolution be complete with this kind of a disparity?
No, I agree. And I think that remains one of our really, really important priorities to address this issue in the ministry and in the government. We call it our mission to connect all Indians, and not just connect Indians with a thin pipe, but giving them the bandwidth and the capacity and capability that today's Indian users deserve and are demanding. One of the most important elements of that is going to be taking the BharatNet, which is the world's largest rural broadband connectivity project, to its last mile conclusion. The Department of Telecommunication, working very closely with METI, is very focused on delivering that last mile rollout. We will soon have the 5G piece coming out that will overlay what we already have in 4G and bring the added, broader pipelines for the consumers. So I think we have, in a way, the broadband piece, the fixed broadband piece, the wireless broadband piece, the cloudification, and we are announcing a national data center and cloud policy that will bring the third element of digitizing Indian consumers and digitizing the Indian economy, or accelerating the digitization of the Indian economy to play. So I think all of this, plus the fact that we are working on ways of making sure that the internet is more inclusive by allowing multiple language access to search engines and browsers, which currently limits only English users and in some parts Hindi users to access the internet, and therefore requiring intermediation. So we have a broad strategy which consists of these 4 or 5 parts, and we are very focused on it. And I believe that this point that you make about having internet of 2 classes in this country, I think that will, in a sense, be replaced by a really common level of basic minimum service quality for all the internet consumers. And frankly, it is a need of the hour, because as the digitization post-COVID of the Indian consumer is accelerating, just like the world's consumers are, the demand is on for better pipes and better bandwidth and better throughput.
We're talking about Atmanirbharta, but is Indian IT and the telecom sector really Atmanirbhar when it comes to hardware? We still are dependent on global support and global companies to drive our internet backbone or telecom backbone.
No, Nikunj, I think if you had made this statement maybe 5 years ago, or at the time when I was a telecom entrepreneur building out cellular networks, I would have completely agreed with you. Like I said, we were for many decades, we were consumers of technologies. We were buying solutions and deploying them and providing services. And I think a marked shift has occurred, not just in the paradigm of networking per se, but also in our own approach towards these products and solutions. First off, I have to tell you that the future networks are going to be less proprietary hardware driven, and our policies are going to make sure these are all virtualized networks with very, very small components of it which are proprietary. So Open RAN, those kinds of solutions are going to be what drive the future of 5G, unlike what you saw on 4G and 3G and 2G, where there were 2.5 or 4 companies that basically built the networks, built the pieces of the network. So that is number one. So the world has changed. The technology world has altered very, very, very decisively. That plays to our strengths. Now, the second part of it is all of these solutions for modern day networking, whether it is virtualized networks, whether it is the pieces of radio that go into a 5G network, are currently being designed, constructed in India. We were always a big player in the design of these networks and design of these components. But it is clear now that there is enough interest. There are startups, there are companies. You saw the latest acquisition of Sankhya Labs by Tejas. These are all signs that there is an appetite, there is an ambition, and there is momentum within the Indian technology ecosystem to be players in building these networks and building components and subcomponents of these networks.
So which is one technology, innovation or implementation you are excited about? We had Mr. Kamath in the morning and he specifically said, look, I'm bullish on India because I'm bullish on Digital India. I'm bullish on Digital India because it is impossible for anyone to understand and calculate the impact it will have on growth and earnings. So what is your understanding of the big revolution which is coming next?
No, look, Nikunj, I've spent over 3.5 decades in technology, and I've had many moments of celebration and excitement. And I can say, not as a minister, just as somebody who's deeply invested emotionally in technology, that I have never been more excited about India and technology as I am today. And there are reasons for it, and I'll explain the reasons for it. It is not one big revolution. There are so many pieces that are coming together, and I think the speaker before me used the phrase of a perfect storm. And it is true. This may sound like rhetoric, but it is an absolute factual reality. And the reasoning is the following. Most of the technology ecosystem is now virtualizing and is becoming more and more software driven. More and more, the compute, the world, the communication world are all increasingly being dominated. Innovation is being dominated by software and innovation, design innovation. That plays to India's strengths. Number two, you have the government, as I alluded to earlier, very deeply invested in, driven by Prime Minister Modi ji's vision that we need to digitize more and more and indeed almost completely digitize governance. That is spawning a whole ecosystem of startups around it. And the third part of it is that in the emerging areas around the internet, while you understand the internet and consumer tech, in the emerging areas around the internet, artificial intelligence, deep tech, R&D, these are all areas again that India is now demonstrating, and Indian startups and Indian young engineers of India are demonstrating a kind of energy, capability and confidence that we did not have even just 5-7 years ago. So I think when somebody tells you they're excited by Digital India, Nikunj, at least for me, I can't pin to one point or one direction and say, this is the one thing about Digital India that excites me. I think we are on the cusp of something big in terms of the tech ecosystem. This may sound like rhetoric, this may sound like hyperbole, but it's a fact. Even for an area like semiconductors, where the Prime Minister very quickly moved and enacted a $10 billion package for the semiconductor ecosystem in December 2021, and just a few months down the road, we have the interest from almost all of the world's majors in looking at India not just as a design hub, but also from a point of view of manufacturing, testing, packaging, and a potential electronics hub which will become one of the leading consumers of semiconductors going forward. So I think there are many things about Digital India that are exciting, but the defining attribute, if you want to call it that, is the absolute confidence and the energy that I'm seeing in the young entrepreneurs and startups, who are just fearless, who are so confident. I've been a startup in my life. I have never seen this type of energy and confidence ever in my last 30 years in India. And I think this is here to stay. The capital flows, as was alluded to by the previous speaker, are supporting these ideas, these innovations, and in a very sustainable way. And just a few years ago, and a decade ago, even the basic idea of capital being available to a young engineer or a young entrepreneur was a Herculean task. There was such a concentration of capital in India. There was this famous House of Cards report of the Credit Suisse, which said 97% of the banking system's net worth was being cornered by just a few groups. All of that is now being left in the wake of all this energy and this progress. So, to answer your question in a nutshell, Nikunj, I hesitate to point to one big revolution. I think there are multiple big things that are happening in the tech space that span the spectrum of things technology, including the move to the Web 3.0, and I think leading the way to these new generations of innovation on the internet.
So do you miss being an entrepreneur again? Because when you were an entrepreneur in your 20s, the law of the land was different, the entrepreneurship was different, cost of capital was different, and availability of talent was different.
Yeah, no, everything was different. I think there's never been a time in the history of India where the government, the young Indian, the opportunities of all, in a sense, aligned so completely to pursue the opportunities. We haven't even talked about, and I didn't even mention the fact that the post-COVID changes in the global value chains are increasingly making this trusted supplier of digital products and services an attribute. It used to be that in the past it was about cost efficiency, it was about supply chain efficiency, and now attributes like trust have crept into GVCs, which again position India very strongly as the world looks for alternate sources of digital products and services. Look, I have stopped, people kept telling me in 2006, why were you leaving telecom? I left at that time and I made politics and public life my focus. I've done so for 15 years. Yes, I think if you ask me, this is the best time ever in the history of independent India in the last 75 years to be an entrepreneur, to go out there and cast your net with your idea. But I have no regrets. I still am playing a role in helping this all become a reality. It is a role that I'm fortunate to have been given by the Honorable Prime Minister, and I'm deeply privileged that if I can help the journey of our country and our aspirations and ambitions of the digital economy to get where it should be. And so I'm happy with that.
Final question. I'll not take the liberty of extending my appointment beyond that with you. We had Mr. Kamath and we had a couple of other financial market representatives in the morning, and they said, look, what are we talking about? I mean, we are a $3 trillion economy and we don't even have a $500 million company in terms of market cap. Do you think it is not impossible to dream that one day, and sooner than later, India will get its own $1 trillion company?
Look, I would like there to be $1 trillion Indian company, but I would also like there to be, another 10,000 billion dollar companies. I'm more focused on this creating the 10,000 billion dollar companies, because I know if there are 10,000 billion dollar companies, clearly one of them will surely become hundreds of billions of dollars or $1 trillion if that is the ultimate goal. The opportunity for India is not necessarily about creating one behemoth, one large company. It is about really taking the digital opportunity across the board to the smaller cities, smaller towns, and to youngsters who always had limited opportunities for decades. Their families had limited opportunities, get into engineering, do your medicine, do your graduate, and now they are they have a world full of opportunities. We have the skilling ecosystem that allows them to go where they want to go. We have an education policy that allows vocational training to be part of the curricular education system from the age of from the 8th standard. So we have a lot of these things that have come together that allows for opportunity and for youngsters to go pursue things that their fathers and their grandfathers would never have thought of. And I'll just share with you before I close. We ran in my ministry a program for students of government schools. 1,000 school students were chosen to do a small program on AI. And the girl who got the first prize for the best AI program was a daughter of a farmer in Uttar Pradesh from a government school, and who did a total AI application that could use an image of a crop and spew out what the solutions for that crop should be in terms of water, fertilizer, what type of fertilizer concentration. That is what today is the reality of India. And so, with no offense to anybody who wants to build $1 trillion company or believes that that is the metric by which India's digital economy will be measured, I think our goal and the realizable goal is to create thousands of these $1 billion companies that serve the Indian consumer, Indian enterprises, and so do they serve global consumers and global enterprises.
Well, what a lovely answer. Really appreciate your time. And thank you, sir, once again for being part of the India Economic Conclave. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rajeev, and thank you, Nikunj, for that insightful session. Our next session